I look at expectations of, and I say this to the military members that are roughly in 20 years right now and are watching this video. And I think a lot of us at that point, you're in 20 years, you're definitely a supervisor, you're definitely a manager, you're overseeing tons of responsibility, etc., because you've been doing that work for 20 years, right? Um, but I think some people have an expectation, well, they should just be able to cross right over and have that same level of responsibility. They should be able to be at that same level inside of a company. And for some people, they can. And maybe they can hit the ground running and do it. I would just say, um, if you were to look at it this way, if you took uh, your 20-year civilian and you went ahead and they were very successful inside the civilian sector, and then you went ahead and you put them in your unit, right? Would the same expectation be there that that person should be able to be that senior enlisted leader, that squadron superintendent, that first sergeant? Should they be able to just cross right over and do that same job? And I think most military members would say, no, absolutely not. There's too many things they don't know about. There's too many organizational norms they're not aware of.
Welcome to this episode of the Military Transition Academy podcast. If you've been wondering what project management really looks like outside the uniform and maybe heard a few myths about it, you are in the right place. Today, we are joined by Mike, who retired from the Air Force in 2018 and now works at the Navy Nuclear Laboratory. In this conversation, Mike breaks down the myths, the truths, and the hard realities of civilian project management and shares the tools and mindset shifts that helped him succeed after service. Welcome, Mike, to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Misty. My name is Mike Falcho, retired in 2018 from the Air Force. So 21 years of service there, and I was a loadmaster while I was in a C-130 loadmaster. Joined when I was 18, retired 21 years later, and then what brought me here today was during my last year of transition, I did go ahead and use the Air Force COLE program and via Vets to PM, and I ended up receiving my PMP, and I still have it to this day. And it did help me transition to out of the Air Force. So I just wanted to give back a little bit to the community that helped me transition through.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rhetoric on LinkedIn about the value of PMP, whether it is actually valuable. And so first and foremost, what made you want to earn your PMP? So right before you transitioned, you took an exam prep course, earned that PMP, but what got you there? I know Air Force School is a really good funding site, and it is something that every airman should utilize if you have access to it. But what made you actually seek out the PMP?
So I think what's important to understand is for the Air Force COLE, they take your Air Force Specialty Code, your AFSC, and then they match what certifications Air Force COLE is willing to pay or in regards to your AFSC. So when I went ahead and I looked at, okay, I'm a loadmaster, a 1 Alpha 2 AFSC. What are those certifications? The ones that I went through, there was more than just having a PMP, but that is the one that I thought fit me the best, just because the work I was doing at the end of my career had a lot of the project management work associated with it, whether it was scheduling or looking at scope of a mission, if you will, and making sure like we didn't have mission creep or scope creep that it's referred to. Those types of things, I felt that it was really the PMP really spoke to what the work I was doing within my last year's service. So that's why I chose the PMP for me.
Yeah, and most service members are walking out of the military with some sort of project management skill set. And that's what we really like to stress, is that project management is a skill set. It's not just an industry or a career, but it is a function, right? And most professionals, regardless of what industry or what duty title you hold, most professionals are going to manage projects in some way, shape, or form. And so you're managing the scope, the schedule, the budget, and the quality of that unique good service product or result. And obviously, you're initiating, planning, executing, and adjusting and closing. And so when you look at the project management functions, most of us know how to manage projects, right? Small, medium, large. And obviously, it does look different depending on your career field, your industry, but we do have a skill set. And so why not validate that skill set with a globally recognized, credential that could help you translate your military skill set? So tell us what brought you to Vets to PM. There's a lot of different programs and organizations out there. What made you choose us?
So there is a lot of different organizations, and what chose me was just I did have a friend of mine that did it prior, and then they were speaking to it, and during that conversation, I realized that person, there was not much effort that they had to do to get that Air Force cool money. To me, it seemed very streamlined when this person was explaining to me, where, yeah, you just submit a few items and Invest to PM takes all of that information, and they're the ones that go through and make all those connections for Air Force coal for you to go ahead and do the program. And that's what spoke to me a lot. There wasn't much effort because if you're a military person that's getting close to retirement, you are busy within that last year and you're trying to do everything you can for your transition, but anything that you can knock off your plate and let someone else do for you is what you should be doing at that point. So Vets to PM, they really did streamline the efforts. There wasn't much work on my part. And before I know it, I had emails sitting in my inbox saying, hey, you're ready for your boot camp. So that's why I chose Vets to PM. I was notified from a friend, but the friend was speaking the truth when it was very hands off, and Vets to PM did take it from cradle to grave all the way to getting your PMP.
Yeah, word of mouth is our best marketing. And so, as the marketing manager, sometimes it's annoying because I do a lot more content in social media, but word of mouth, it really, brings more customers to us. And we are the one-stop shop, and we are veterans for veterans. So, we've been in your shoes. I'm a Vets to PM success story. Our operations officer, Jeremy, is a retired chief. He's a Vets to PM success story. Our program manager for PMP, Garrick, he's a Vets to PM success story. So although the process has changed a little bit with Air Force Cool, because Air Force Cool is, sometimes makes it a little bit more challenging for people to use that entitlement, but we still are there. So we provide the step-by-step instructions, the emails along the way, and truly we do try to, decrease the barrier to entry, because that's what frustrates people, is getting the approval to actually, not only sit for the course, but sit for the exam. And so we try to, sort of limit that stress. And so tell us about the exam prep course. What was it that you liked, or what worked for you, and what made you truly study and earn your PMP?
So the exam prep course is, for me, if we're referring to the boot class,
Yep.
um, I did that at the time. I was stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, Joint Base McGuire. So I had a very good commander at the time that went ahead and let me do my permissive TDY and take it out at Dover. So at Dover, there was a handful of people that was taking the class there. So they went ahead and hosted the event. I went ahead and did a permissive TDY out there. And it was basically, if I remember at the time, it was uh, roughly a 1 week course, possibly a Monday through Thursday,
Yep.
and very inundated, very focused. And it was, it went ahead and spoke a lot to where they were matching up, like, this is what you do on your day-to-day basis in the military, and let's go ahead and compare it of what project management means. So kind of like that idea of when we're talking about the mission with the military. Well, um, when you're talking about mission creep, like I spoke earlier, and then you're talking about scope creep, that is something that spoke to me very well inside of that class. And there was just examples upon examples where Vets to PM did a very good job of saying, look at this terminology, and this is a terminology that's being used in the project management world. And they went ahead and they synced them up very well, that at the end of the course, I felt confident that, hey, I just needed some time to study the PMBOK, and I studied that PMBOK. I was very structured with it, and I probably studied that PMBOK for roughly 30 days, an hour or two a day. And what I did at the end of it is I went ahead and scheduled my test, and I went and took my test, and I passed it. So it wasn't a long time in between the boot camp class to receiving my PMP. Honestly, within a 2 month.
Yeah, and we find it, we have a lot of people, unfortunately, that will take the exam prep course and then never follow through and earn their PMP. And we find that people are more successful when they attend the class, apply to sit for the exam, start their 30-day study plan, and then schedule their exam within 60 days. And I have found, because I'm an instructor as well, so I have found that most of my students who do not do that will not earn their PMP. And the exam prep course, it's fire hose of information. So if you think about going to school for being a lawyer for 4 years, then you have to take the bar. And so you got to prep for the bar. So you take an exam prep course for the bar. Going to school for nursing for 4 years, then you have to take the NCLEX. And so you'll need to prep for the NCLEX. So then you take an exam prep course for, the nursing certification. It's the same thing for project management. So you have to have 36 to 60 months of project management experience. And so anywhere from, 3 to 5 years. And so you do that, and then you want to take the PMP. So now you take an exam prep course to prepare for the exam, because sometimes project management is going to look different, in your career field via, the PMBOK, right? Or what PMI believes project management looks like. So you had mentioned, when we were talking and discussing you coming on the show, you had mentioned that you really enjoyed the fact that you did the exam prep course, the timing of it, and then you earned your PMP and then retired. Talk a little bit about that, why you feel like that benefited you.
So I feel like it benefited me personally because it's still valuable today. So, I mean, to give the audience an understanding, um, like where I work at the Naval Nuclear Laboratory, we're a bunch of contractors um, that support the Navy, support the Department of Energy, but um, we have our training requirements and opportunities, if you will, just like how the military has it. So what I found interesting is when I was joining the Naval Nuclear Laboratory, the PMP was very sought after at the time, and
Yeah.
it still is to this day. So what do I mean by that? Every year you can go ahead and for free, where I work, you sign up for project management classes that earn your professional development units, your PDUs, towards your PMP. So I still have my PMP. I hold an active PMP right now. And the way I do that is because through where I work, I'm able to take a formalized training class once a year that gives me my PDUs in a 3 year period. Um, so for me, like when I left the Air Force and I, started doing the job hunt, I found it interesting of how the PMP, especially where I got hired at, was sought after to the point when I was in my interview, one of the hiring managers was asking me what I did to earn my PMP because they were trying to earn their PMP. So I just felt like it was a very good decision in 2018, and I still feel this way today that it's still a good decision to get because it is sought after, and you'll see on it may be that one item that separates you from the other candidate on a job hunt.
Yeah, and it's a credential. So PMP is very different from, other certifications. It's an actual credential. So very similar to PhD or, master's, you can put it at the end of your name, PMP, and most people are going to understand what that means. That means that you have project management experience, but you also, validated that experience with a certification. And in order to maintain that certification, and this is where the magic happens, I believe, is that you have to achieve 60 PDUs in 3 years. And so throughout your project management career, whatever that looks like, right? Whether you're a formal project manager or you utilize project management, skills to carry out your job, now you can upskill accordingly. And so I remember I was having some issues with, risk management. And so I took some PDUs to help me with managing risks. Same thing with earned value management, took some PDUs to help me with, EVM. And so that's where the magic happens is you have to prove that you have the experience to actually be a certified PMP. You take the exam, and that takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, right? But then you maintain it, and you are maintaining it by upskilling and becoming a more effective and efficient project manager. And I would argue that it's probably, you know, it's one of the main call outs on federal contracts is we have to have a PMP on the contract. And it may not be the one thing that gets you a job, but I will tell you it's what's going to make you stand out, especially if you know how to manage projects. So just having the credential is not as important as having the credential and knowing how to be effective and efficient while you're managing projects. You also mentioned the importance of a degree, or maybe the not importance of a degree. So I want you to talk a little bit about how you feel about earning your degree.
Sure. I think there's a lot of chatter of lately on the internet of saying, hey, does every job require a degree? And I understand that argument because it seems like there are many industry out there that someone may pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a degree and they're not having $100,000 job. So I understand that argument. But what I will say is, in the sense of being a project manager, I I found it very hard, and I would just say I never found it to any type of job posting that I was looking at that did not require a degree. So what I would just say to the people out there still in the military, please realize, like, every job you go for is going to say, if it's a project manager job, it's going to say degree required, bachelor's degree required, and it may say like a master's degree preferred. And then that is where you would also see like a PMP is desired as well. So that degree is going to be required. So I would just recommend to anyone out there, if you're contemplating, like, do I really need a degree? Should I re-enlist and get my degree while I'm in? I would say yes. I would not hesitate that. And the reason I say get it while you're in is, if you're not doing school while you're in, the chances of you getting out and doing school on the outside is probably low as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and all you have to do is take one class at a time, and before you know it, your credits just start building up. And then you take one class at a time, and you're like, hey, can I handle two classes at a time? Um, and then you can have the Air Force or whatever service hopefully pay for your degree, and then you can hand off, whether it's your GI Bill, over to a spouse, over to a child. That way, you're setting them up. So I highly recommend, highly encourage, get your degree while you're in. If you think you're going to get it while you're out, and then your idea is, I'm just going to go to school for 4 years, I I would just caution against that, because HR departments, they don't want to see a gap in your resume saying, hey, you left service at this time, then you went ahead and got your degree. What they would rather see is you have your degree when you got out, because it makes them think, hey, the job they were doing while they were in was required a degree, and it allows you not to be that entry level person whenever you're moving on to the civilian sector. It makes them think, hey, I had my degree while I was in. This job required me to have a degree. I'm able just to transition over and not be entry level on the way out. So it's just something to think of. And I encourage people, get your degree while you're in.
Yeah, and as an HR professional, I can tell you, if you like get your degree, if you are wanting a six-figure job, those salary grade requirements are most likely going to require a basic requirement for most job postings in the range that, we are probably looking at is going to require a degree. And most of the time, it's going to be a degree in anything. Like it'll say degree in this or related field, and any recruiter, an effective recruiter, can make any degree be related, right? And so I hear a lot of service members say, well, I was in the military and I did this and I did that and I didn't really have any time to earn a degree. And why does it matter? And I have more experience. And, especially now, ChatGPT, people are doing their degrees on ChatGPT. You can't control what those job postings require. There's labor laws that, recruiters have to adhere to. So you can't control those things. So start looking now at job postings. And if you see that the positions that you're interested in require a degree, it's time to kind of put your pride behind you and go ahead and get your degree. And I tell people this all the time. When I retired in 2019, very close to your timing, I would have been up the river without a paddle if I did not have a degree. There's no way I would have landed the role that I did at Continental Tire if I did not have a degree. That's the first question they asked me. What's your degree in? When did you achieve it? I'm not sure why they asked that question, but I guess that was important to them. And yeah, I would have never been at Continental, had the promotions that I had if I did not have a degree. It matters. When you're talking about salary grades, the only way that they can prove fair and consistent hiring practices is by putting those objective requirements in, and then they'll utilize subjective requirements as well, like the preferred. So I love that you say that, because especially if the service is going to pay all of it or a portion of it, go ahead and get one, because no one can take your degree away from you. Sure, it may not be that important, but you just never know, right? It could mean the difference between a six-figure role or an entry-level job, just like what you said. So take us through, how did you land your role today? I know when we talked, you were really excited about sharing what you do. So talk to us about how you landed that role and, what kind of sets you on fire about project management.
Yeah, so a lot of people haven't heard of the Naval Nuclear Laboratory because it's there's only a handful of them in the United States. But really, what they do is, in general, in a general form, is uh, Navy aircraft carriers, Navy submarines. They have nuclear reactors in them. So those nuclear reactors, the point of them is that's what propels them through the water instead of using diesel fuel like other countries do. So um, it's a Department of Energy program because it is nuclear energy, but it supports the Navy. And those naval nuclear laboratory, the handful of laboratories in the U.S., um, they oversee the cradle to grave of the nuclear reactors. So, in general, what that means is from the idea of a design all the way to burying the nuclear reactor in the ground years down the road. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory oversees that, and they're responsible for it. So I am a civilian contractor, and we don't have many GS employees, if you will. There is GS employees, but what they do is they oversee the program of all the work the contractors are doing. When I left out in 2018, I had a handful of jobs that I was looking at, and that was one of them. And I went ahead and, from my experience looking back, I think I did um, you submit your resume, which is a very frustrating process. You haven't
Yeah.
been through it before. Um, and what I mean by it's a frustrating process is each company's different on their software they use. So I would just say for anyone, like, please have 2 hours set aside to apply for a job. And then, so I went ahead, I applied for my job, and then the waiting game happens. And eventually I received that email saying, okay, we'd like to do a phone interview. And if I remember right, I did two phone interviews and an in-person interview, and then eventually the offer came. So that is how my experience went, and I was doing this while looking at other places as well, so doing multiple interviews and such. So that was my experience on landing the job. And one thing is, I would just say is you have to be patient through the process. And the best way to be patient through the process of transitioning is to set yourself up successfully, being prepared. So while you're in, all of those things that we're talking about to include like, your personal finances and all of that stuff. If you set yourself up while you're in and lock yourself down that last year or 2 years in and really prepare, that being patient becomes easier as you're doing the job hunt. It's not such, it's a stressor, and it's always going to be a stressor. There's no doubt about that. But you can mitigate some of that stress if you over prepare. So that's what I did. I over prepared, and it ended up working out. So it worked well for me. And the PMP really did play a part of that, because I think it did set me apart from the other candidates having a PMP.
Yeah, and you were able to probably identify that transferable skill set and then show and tell it via your, phone interviews and then your in-person interview and even on your resume, right? Because the beauty of taking a PMP exam prep course is that you get the exam content outline. We also provide you the application tool. And so you have tons and tons of language that you can use to help translate your military skill set into language that civilian employers and recruiters are going to understand. So, earning your PMP is not going to, completely like secure you a role, but being able to communicate the value of your skill sets to people that don't know what it is that you do and are not familiar with it, that's where the magic happens. And so, earning that PMP provides you that vernacular in order to do so. And I love that you say, prepare while you're still in the service. You retired as a senior NCO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as senior NCOs, I mean, obviously we have a lot of years. Like you did 21, I did 20. We had a lot of years to kind of figure it out, become financially secure in a way where, if we didn't land a role right away, we'd be okay, right? Of course, it's still stressful, but you have another income source coming in. But what you do today will help you to prepare for tomorrow. And so that's why I tell people all the time, civilians do the same thing. When they start a role, they're always task tracking, they're recording what they're doing, they're updating their resume, they're preparing for the future because especially, in a at will state, you can be let go at any time. And so it's no different in the military. It's your career. Yes, it's a different type of career because you're signing a dotted line. So first you're contracted and then you agree to die for your country, right? And so if it kind of went that way, but while you're in the military, you can still prepare for the future. And so get that degree, upskill, connect, network, all of that stuff that you do in the military is going to help you in the future. And I saw this quote the other day. It said, being financially secure is the number one stress reducer. And I was like, that is absolutely right. I believe, at least for me. I don't know what you think, but
I agree.
yeah. All right. So you get this job. And obviously the PMP helped you. You're able to translate your skill set. And so let's talk about the actual work that you do as far as, giving some myths. Let's debunk some things. So tell us about what project management actually looks like in the civilian sector.
Right. So it looks different everywhere you work. And
Yeah.
that's the first thing I would say is, and even where you work, it's going to look different, which each organization
Yeah.
uh, works. So, and I think that's a myth I'd like to debunk, is where people think like they look at PMI and they're looking at the PMBOK and they think, well, this is what my day in and day out job would look like. It's not for me. And I would just say, like, the PMBOK, it's very big for a reason, because it's trying to hit every discipline of project management. For me, what I do on a day in and day out, without getting too much into the weeds, is, the Naval Nuclear Laboratory, we have a ton of engineers and we have a ton of scientists um, that do the work for nuclear reactors. And then those people need supporting staff, right? Um, they're your value makers in the sense of, like, look, they're designing, they're testing, they're experimenting, they're doing that stuff. Those people shouldn't be spending their time building schedules, looking at budgets, all of that stuff. You want those value makers doing that work, and then you have your support staff to do that for them. And that's where I come in. So I look at it as like my day in and day out. Do we have project management schedules? Sure. Do we have documents that we're looking at scope and seeing like, well, can we de-scope some of this to get it within budget, to get it within time, to get it in with resources? Yes. We look at risk registers to say, hey, how risky is this project versus this project? All of that stuff we do, but at the same time, it's not so formal as you're going to be in your Vesta PM boot class camp, right? They're getting you prepared for a test with the PMBOK. Your day in and day out job that I have, I do bits and pieces of what's in the PMBOK for what's needed where I work. And some of that is very important. And then there's other things in the PMBOK I've never looked at, I've never touched, and it wouldn't be value added where we work because it would just take too much time and too much effort to do what the PMBOK is explaining. It would be no return on investment. So that is kind of what my day in and day out job is. We look at the facilities and infrastructure on the Naval Nuclear Laboratory, and there's a lot of items that a lot of infrastructure that needs replaced, or if you would look at it kind of like manufacturing, we work at a laboratory, so a lot of renovations have to happen. You may have a building that is going to be doing different type of work, so inside of that building, everything needs to be refitted, retold for the new project that we're going to be implementing. So my where I fit in is we've determined, is it in scope? Do we have the budget for it? Do we have the time for it? Do we have the resources for it? And it's kind of in a sense of um, there's a term called a PMO, a project management organization, and you would look at it. That's kind of the type of work that I do because I do that at a portfolio level, and then there's a bunch of other project managers out there doing their projects, and all of that gets rolled up underneath a PMO. Well, we don't call ourselves a PMO, but that's kind of the work that we're doing is PMO oriented. That because we're looking at it as a rolled up portfolio view of the work at where I work at. And my laboratory that I work at is at the Pittsburgh site in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and that's really important for everyone to understand. I had, a veteran the other day, he wanted to drop the class because he told me, "No way, this is not what I want to do." And I said, "Hey, this is actually not what project management, may be in the industry or the role that, you choose." And so the foundations are there, right? We all need to know how to effectively and efficiently initiate, plan, execute, adjust, and close, but every organization is going to have its own project management framework. Like when I worked at Continental Tire, we had a project management framework called PROMPT, and it stood for project management in tire. And so we were the tire industry, right? And so we had our own project management framework. And so we had our own things to do when it came to initiating, planning, executing, adjusting, and closing. But all of that is going to, the certification validates your experience in project management that you can then take with you to your next role and adapt, accordingly based on how that organization manages and runs projects. And so they're really just hiring you for your experience and your ability to adapt and adjust according to how they want projects to be managed. And I would also say too, I think veterans have a leg up, and I know that you've discussed this before, but stakeholder management is a huge role in project management, and not every project manager does this well. So how did your military career prepare you to manage stakeholders in the civilian sector?
I think the that last year or 2 years in my military career, the I was what you would call an air advisor. So it's a very small organization, and basically what we were doing at that time was, I think the unit is still around, but um, basically in the continent of Africa, you have a bunch of U.S. embassies for the 50-ish number of countries. So I learned stakeholder management well because what it was is a U.S. embassy would have a need. We would go over to the embassy. We would take a look at the country, and then we would start assessing what type of capability or capacity that country could benefit from of us teaching them, right? So that was my last couple of years that I did in the military. Well, probably it was probably like my last 5 years because I was an air advisor on a 1 year in Afghanistan. Um, but the point was, is what I learned from that was there was many different stakeholders doing that work, right? So you would have the U.S. Embassy, you would have the Department of Defense, then you would have the MAGCOM, you would have your wing. Everyone was a stakeholder in some way, shape, or form. Whether your wing commander was sending a small team of people out inside a country, and that wing commander wanted to make sure, hey, for their stake, is everyone going to be safe? Is everyone has their head on right that they're not going to have an international incident, etc. Right? Um, all the way up to the U.S. Embassy wanting to make sure we were building out partner capacity and capabilities for the country. And then the country themselves, the customer of everything, had a stake as well. So I did a lot of stakeholder management. And I mention this just for examples of when military members, if they're watching this and they're like, well, we don't have stakeholder management. That's why I gave those examples here, is because you may not think they're stakeholders, but everything from your MAGCOM to your wing commander to your customer, at the end of the day, they're all stakeholders to the work you're doing. That did play a part coming into the role I have now, because when we're doing that portfolio work, um, you have everyone that has a requirement, everyone has a need, and everyone wants the same thing, and you have to manage them uh, properly to keep everyone happy, to keep the mission going, etc. So I did learn that in the military, and it did transition over just because there's resources are very limited. So when stakeholder management, where I work at now, is budgets are tight. Uh, there's not enough employees to do all the work that's out there. There's not enough money to do all the work out there, and there's not enough time to get everything done. And that's just normal project management. So you have to manage that stakeholders in the sense of letting them understand the situation, how they fit into that situation among everyone else, and just trying to keep everyone happy in a sense, but just letting everyone understand, like, look, there is a common good. We all work for the same company at the end of the day, and this is for the company. We can't just be thinking about your organization independently of the company as a whole. So that was my experience with stakeholder management.
Yeah, and I do believe that most veterans are coming out of the military with a strong stakeholder management skill set, because we do have to manage a lot of, people who have stakes in the project, right? And so if you think about everything that we do in the military, we're working with, cross-functional teams, we're working with, different kind of units and departments on the base or the post, whatever it may be. And you're going to see these people often. They're always going to be involved in different projects. And so it's about building that community and that network, and in the Air Force, we used to call it a community of practice. And that's like where we had a personnel and manpower community of practice. And so, people at Moody would talk with people at Shaw because we're, Air Combat Command. And so we have sort of similar interest and programs and stuff like that. And so we could talk to each other and learn about what we do and what you do here. And this could help me here. And you're consistently networking and communicating. That's stakeholder management. That's that. And that's a huge skill set that most project managers, you know, engineers and stuff like that don't always have. So it is something that we bring to the table. All right, so before we get into the one question that I'd love for you to answer about expectations of the civilian sector, what are some tools or things that you use now in your project management career that maybe we could become a little bit more familiar with in just training or something while we're still in the service?
I think for me, what I would say, the one bit type of software that there's many different types of software out there, but I would say Oracle has a scheduling software out there called Primavera, also referred to as P6. That is software that if you are able to watch your YouTube videos, if you are able to get your hands on it and schedule with it and learn it, um, it may it, it would pay big dividends probably depending on where you're going to work, because a lot of places do use P6. Um, to give you an example, like during my interview I had of where I work now, they showed me a P6 schedule and was asking me, to read it, to look at the critical path, etc., and asking me like what the predecessor was, what the successor was, all of that stuff, right? So that is one software that I would say you can learn it, and you can and if you can't get your hands on Primavera, Microsoft Project is similar, right?
Yeah, very similar.
People just say like, well, Primavera is kind of like Microsoft Project on steroids, if you will. You can do more with it. So that's why I would just say if you can get your hands on Primavera, that'd be great. But just watching, there's plenty of videos out there. You can just watch videos on YouTube and start getting your understanding of how Primavera works. And more than likely, if you're not experienced with Primavera, but you can read a schedule or whatnot, you're going to go to where you work, and then they're going to put you through a class of Primavera with a vendor that goes ahead and they go ahead and teach Primavera, which will at least get your foundation ready to go work where you're at. So I would say scheduling software would be the best thing.
Yeah, and it's important too to look at the job postings, before your interview, like really look at the job postings and what they want you to have experience in or general knowledge in. And a really good example of this is when I went to the Continental Tire interview, they wanted me to have experience in Workday, right? Workday is a human resources information system. Well, in the military, we worked with MILPIDS, right? At that time, military personnel data system. And so what I did was I took a Workday training, a free training, and then I watched tons and tons of YouTube channels and YouTube videos on Workday. And then I compared and then was able to speak as if I used Workday. And what I did was when they asked me the question, I said, I don't have specific experience with Workday because that's not the HR information system that I used in my 20-year career. But let me tell you the similarities, blah, blah, blah. So I was able to speak to it. That's what we just need to do, right? And so watch those videos, lots of free trainings out there. If you have LinkedIn Premium, you can find training on Primavera, Workday, all of those, with that membership. And so it's just about understanding what's required and then being able to bridge the gap between what you actually have experience in and then speak it so they can be like, okay, well, she knows how to work this system or he knows how to work this system. So they'll be able to do that as well. So as we wrap up, Mike, this has been an awesome conversation. One thing I kept nodding my head when we spoke before, in order to set up this podcast, when you discuss expectations. And so people ask me often, what is the number one thing that disappointed you about the civilian sector? And my answer is my own expectations. So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think the expectations is um, what are you expecting your day in and day out, and where are you going to land in the civilian sector whenever you left, right? Whenever you leave the military. Um, for me, I did not start off as a project manager for the role that I said, like I started with the Naval Nuclear Laboratory. I started off as a project analyst, and what that did for me is it allowed me to get my foot in the door, if you will, and
Yeah.
it allowed me to be able to work at a level that I knew that I was going to be able to work at, um, because I did not think I was ready to look at to be a project manager where I work just yet. When I was reading up on job descriptions, um, could I have done it? I think so, but I would have been drowning doing it. At the project analyst level, I was like, okay, I could feel comfortable going in here. I can learn scheduling software. And then eventually, once I know the system, the business, then I can go ahead and find a PM role that I think would fit me better, right? So I look at expectations of, and I say this to the military members that are roughly in 20 years right now and are watching this video. And I think a lot of us at that point, you're in 20 years, you're definitely a supervisor, you're definitely a manager, you're overseeing tons of responsibility, etc., because you've been doing that work for 20 years, right? Um, but I think some people have an expectation, well, they should just be able to cross right over and have that same level of responsibility. They should be able to be at that same level inside of a company. And for some people, they can. And maybe they can hit the ground running and do it. I would just say, um, if you were to look at it this way, if you took uh, your 20-year civilian and you went ahead and they were very successful inside the civilian sector, and then you went ahead and you put them in your unit, right? Would the same expectation be there that that person should be able to be that senior enlisted leader, that squadron superintendent, that first sergeant? Should they be able to just cross right over and do that same job? And I think most military members would say, no, absolutely not. There's too many things they don't know about. There's too many organizational norms they're not aware of. There's just too many, like, there's too many things that the military does that that person has no idea about. But I think your argument would be like, well, would you consider that person entry level that's coming in possibly from 38 to 45 years old? Do you think they're more qualified than the 18 or the 22-year old? And I think that, the military member would say, well, yeah, of course, but they shouldn't be the first sergeant of the unit. I would just say you need to have that mindset, that framework when you're going into the civilian sector. You are going to be a little bit behind the power curve of understanding how business happens in the civilian sector, those organizational norms where, you know, um, workday, like you were just talking about, like you're going to be like, huh, with a deer in the headlights, just as that civilian coming over would be like, Milpids, huh? What does that mean? All of those connections you're going to have to learn on the outside. So for expectations, I would just say I'm never saying, hey, shoot very low, just get your foot in the door, because you don't want to go too low either. Because if you go too low, HR has requirements of saying, hey, you can't come in at this level and then say, well, I'm comfortable now, I'm going to skip
Yeah.
4 levels. You can't do that either. But what I'm saying is you have to have some humility on the outside of saying, hey, you're not going to go right in and just be as performing at the same level you're doing right now in the military world, because it is a different world. So that's just something I would pass on.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Mike, I've been doing this for a long time, and that is the best way that I've ever heard it explained. I've tried to articulate it, but that is the best way that I've ever heard it explained. And so I hope everyone hears that and maybe go back and listen to it again. And I did the same thing, Mike. I wanted to, get my foot in the door. And so I applied for human resources business partner instead of human resources manager or director, which would be the equivalent of what I was doing in the military. But in no way, shape, or form did I want to compound the stress that I knew that I was going to feel trying to figure out life after the military after serving 20 years, right? And so I'm so glad I did that because it truly helped me get inundated into the organization, understand what HR looks like in the civilian sector. But I also was able to sort of live a bit stress free without having to be the manager or director, and that was the best thing that I probably could have done for my post-service career. And I often mentor others to, think about that. But I love the point that you made about you're not starting at the bottom, right? You're going to be at the beginning of this new career transition with tons and tons of experience that shouldn't have you, in an entry level role. But we also have to be mindful that if you do enter too low, I mean, it could be years before you are able to progress to the next level because there are lots of rules and regulations when it comes to, promotions and stuff like that. For example, like you had to be in a position for 1 year before you could apply for another position. You couldn't go up more than 2 salary grades. And so there were lots and lots of restrictions. So you have to be mindful of that as well. And I hear a lot, I'm sure you do too, oh, well, I'm worth six figures. Okay. But you're also in the same sentence asking for work-life balance. So six-figure salaries require six-figure work. So be mindful of what it is that you want in your post-service career. So what's one tip, one last thing that you would like to, tell our audience when it comes to, their transition self as they go through this process and trying to figure out, is project management for me? Do I have the experience? Am I ready?
I think what I would just say is um, do not take for granted the military, uh, how much time, effort, and money being spent on your training in the military. And I say that in the sense of when you do, and you will land a job and you will work somewhere, and you may be wondering, like, well, like, I don't feel like I'm being trained, or I don't feel like my training is like, where's the continuity book and where is this? And so many people like show me exactly how to do that. I would just say, companies on the outside, and I say this because I thought it as well. I felt like, wow, like I just don't understand, like training is not valued here, or I don't want to say it like that, but I just feel like training is not taking is not resource as much as it was in the military. And I'm like, well, why is that? Well, it's money. It comes down to money. So,
And time. And
and
time. Yeah.
for because time is money, right?
Yep.
And that's a resource on the military side. Like time is not money because you're working for them 24/7. You will just stay later, right?
Yeah. Such a good point. Yeah.
So I think that was the one thing that I hear from other military retirees, and to include myself, is just the aspect of saying, look, people are not going to hand feed you everything or just train you till you get it eventually. And that's how the military was. The military spends a lot of money, like for the Air Force people, like you're familiar with Airman Leadership School, NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy, and
Chief.
depending on your type of job, you did 7 level school, or like for me, like I was air crew, I had to be an air crew instructor, and then I was an air crew instructor inside of AETC command, training command, which is even more. And they put so much money and time into making you an instructor, where it's like civilian communities, civilian businesses, they don't have that. They don't have people that have went to certain type of trainings and they know how to teach you on how to do their job. The military was always about train your replacement. No one wants to train you to replace themselves, right, on the outside. So it's just that mindset that you need to understand, and saying, look, there's going to be a lot of self-seeking that you're going to have to do on the outside to become comfortable. No one is going to be saying, hey, this is exactly how we do it here. You're going to have to figure some of those things out on your own. And I'm going to guess, like, if you're 20 years in the military, you should be able to figure it out on your own eventually as well, right? Like, you did 20 years, and that's something to be proud of. Just realize, like, no one is going to be spoon feeding you anything on the outside at your new job. You'll get training, trust me, but you're probably going to be underwhelmed from the training, because a lot of it's implied, like, hey, we hired you because you're supposed to be able to hit the ground running. So
Yep.
we're not here to train you. We don't have the time or the money to do it.
Yeah, and if you put adaptable, flexible, resilient on your resume, then you need to show that you are. And I will tell you that there are a lot of veterans that I talk to, and it's no disrespect, it's just a fact, but they prove to me often that they're not necessarily adaptable, flexible, or resilient. Maybe they are in their own comfort zone. But when I was at Continental, it took me 2 weeks, and a great colleague, Carla and Emily, and they said, hey, we don't have everything mapped out. There's not a checklist for everything. We don't have an SOP for everything. So we're just going to need you to develop it. And that was the best advice, because they basically were saying, hey, we hired you to do this shit. So we're going to need you to hit the ground running and do it. So you can complain all you want that there's no checklist, or you can just prove to us why we hired you. So it took me 2 weeks and two great colleagues to kind of really figure that out, because we're just so used to it. And so obviously, 20 years, I mean, there's a checklist for everything, right? But yeah, and if you want if you want to be in that position, then you need to show them why they hired you. Mike, this has been a great conversation. I do think that the veteran audience is going to, really benefit from this. How can people find you or connect with you if they maybe want to ask you any additional questions?
Sure, you can just private message me on LinkedIn. I'm there. Um, no other social media. So yeah, just DM, and I will definitely answer back.
All right. Well, we appreciate you so much for feeding into the veteran community. And it definitely seems like you have achieved your meaningful and lucrative post service career, whatever your definition is. And it really all started with what you did in the military and then taking a PMP boot camp plus course, earning that PMP, and then being able to show and tell that military skill set in a way where, civilians understand. And obviously, because of your, 20-year plus career, you're able to adapt to an environment and truly show them your unique value add. So we're excited that you are living your best post-service life, Mike. And if we can help you with anything, let us know. Thank you for this conversation.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us at the Military Transition Academy podcast. If we sparked your interest and you're ready to learn more, visit vets2pm.com.